Day 22. One tiny piece of metal was flying toward me at over 17,000 miles per hour. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't see it. But if it hit my suit, I'd have less than a minute before the vacuum of space did the rest. As I floated hundreds of miles above Earth, gripping the outside of the International Space Station with one hand, I realized something terrifying. The hardest part of being an astronaut wasn't going to space. It was surviving everything that came after. But to understand how I ended up there, we have to go back to day one. Growing up, I thought astronauts spent their days floating around, looking out the window and taking cool pictures of Earth. Turns out, that's probably the smallest part of the job. The first thing I learned was that astronauts train for years before they're even allowed near a rocket. I had 30 days. Not exactly ideal. On my first morning, I walked into the training facility wearing a brand new blue flight suit, trying to look confident. Inside, everyone else looked completely relaxed, which somehow made me even more nervous. One instructor smiled and asked me a simple question. Ever been upside down for an hour? No, you will. That should have been my warning. Within 2 hours, I was strapped inside a spinning chair designed to confuse my brain. The room wasn't moving. I was. My eyes told me one thing. My inner ear told me another. My stomach chose violence. Let's just say, lunch didn't stay where it belonged. Apparently, space motion sickness affects most astronauts during their first days in orbit. Great, one challenge down, about 1,000 to go. The next test was surprisingly simple. Pick up a small screwdriver. Easy, right? Except I had to do it while wearing thick pressurized gloves similar to the ones used during spacewalks. Suddenly my fingers felt like giant sausages. I dropped the screwdriver, then dropped it again, then somehow managed to throw it across the room. The instructor didn't even react. He just said, "In space, that tool doesn't hit the floor. It keeps floating." That's when it hit me. Every single object has to be attached to something. Pens, cameras, food, computers, even your toothbrush. Otherwise, it simply drifts away. Imagine losing your laptop because it floated into another module. Not exactly ideal. By day 3, I finally got to experience something I'd dreamed about my entire life. Weightlessness. Well, sort of. Using a special aircraft that flies in giant parabolic arcs, I experienced about 20 seconds of zero gravity at a time. The first few seconds were incredible. I pushed gently away from the wall and floated effortlessly across the cabin. For the first time, I understood why astronauts always smile in those videos. Then I rotated the wrong way, started spinning, couldn't stop, panicked, and accidentally bumped into another trainee. So yes, even floating takes practice. Over the next few days, I learned that space is basically one long list of rules. Always secure your equipment. Always know where your crewmates are. Always double check every switch, because small mistakes become very big problems. One afternoon, we practiced emergency procedures. Fire, loss of pressure, toxic leaks. I expected maybe one drill. Instead, they kept throwing new disasters at us without warning. Every decision had to become automatic. No hesitation, no guessing, no panic. That was harder than anything physical. By the end of the first week, I thought I'd finally earned a break. Instead, they introduced the pool. At first glance, it looked like an Olympic swimming pool. It wasn't. Hidden beneath the water was a full-size replica of parts of the International Space Station. This giant pool lets astronauts rehearse spacewalks while floating underwater. The suit alone weighed hundreds of pounds on Earth. Luckily, underwater, it became almost weightless. Unluckily, it was still exhausting. Every movement required effort. Every tool had a checklist. Every task took forever. Replacing a single component that would have taken me 2 minutes on Earth suddenly took nearly half an hour. For the first time, I realized astronauts aren't selected because they're fearless. They're selected because they're patient. Around day 10, everything changed. Until then, I still secretly believed space was mostly about adventure. Then they showed us a normal daily schedule aboard the ISS. Wake up, medical check, mission briefing, science experiments, maintenance, cleaning filters, repairing equipment, exercise for 2 hours, more experiments, planning tomorrow, sleep. Almost every minute had a purpose. Even working out wasn't optional. Without daily exercise, astronauts lose muscle and bone density surprisingly fast in microgravity. Space wasn't a vacation. It was one of the busiest workplaces on Earth, ironically located hundreds of miles above it. And that's when I stopped pretending I was preparing for the coolest job in the world. I realized I was preparing for one of the most demanding. A few days later, the simulator doors finally opened. This was the closest thing I'd get to actually living aboard the International Space Station. The moment I climbed inside, I completely lost my sense of direction. There wasn't really an up or a down. Every wall could become the floor. Every ceiling could become a hallway. I reached for a handrail and instinctively tried to stand up. The instructor laughed. Forget everything your brain thinks it knows. That turned out to be one of the hardest lessons of the entire month. By the middle of the challenge, everyday tasks had become strangely difficult. Eating, sleeping, even drinking water. You can't pour water into a glass in space. It forms floating bubbles. Astronauts drink through sealed pouches with straws to keep everything under control. Sleeping wasn't any easier. There are no beds. You zip yourself into a sleeping bag that's attached to the wall so you don't drift around the station all night. Imagine waking up because you slowly floated into a control panel. It sounds funny until you realize that's exactly why everything is secured. Every tiny detail exists because someone thought about what could go wrong. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. Spacewalk training. Putting on the suit took almost an hour. It was enormous, heavy, stiff. And once the helmet locked into place, everything became quieter. My own breathing echoed inside the visor. For a moment, it felt like I was completely alone. The instructor looked at me one last time. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. I didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet. The outside of the station was breathtaking. Earth filled half the sky beneath me. Bright blue oceans, swirling white clouds, a thin layer of atmosphere that suddenly looked incredibly fragile. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stare. But astronauts don't go outside to admire the view. They go outside because something needs to be fixed. Every movement had to be deliberate. Every tool stayed attached with safety tethers. Every step followed an exact procedure. One mistake could create another problem, and another, and another. Then, day 22 happened. We were halfway through replacing a communications unit when mission control interrupted the exercise. Their voices instantly changed. Short, calm, serious. Possible orbital debris. Prepare to terminate the EVA. My heart immediately started racing. Orbital debris can travel at over 17,000 miles per hour. Even a tiny fragment can punch through metal. Or worse. I reached for my tether, checked it once, checked it again, started securing my tools. One wrench refused to lock into place. Normally, that would have been a minor inconvenience. Now it felt like an eternity. Every second suddenly mattered. The instructor repeated the order. Leave it if necessary. My brain wanted to finish the task. Training wanted perfection. Survival wanted speed. Finally, I let the wrench go. It stayed attached by its backup tether exactly as it was designed to do. One less thing to worry about. I turned, pulled myself back toward the airlock, and forced myself to breathe slowly. The same breathing technique I'd practiced during those awful spinning chair sessions on day one. Back then, it felt pointless. Now, it kept me calm. A few minutes later, the hatch sealed behind us. Only afterward did Mission Control confirm that the debris had passed safely without threatening the station. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic happened. And somehow, that made the moment even more terrifying. Because in space, success often means nothing happened at all. During the final week, something unexpected changed. The things that had once overwhelmed me became automatic. I clipped every tool into place without thinking. I checked every latch twice. I moved slower, but somehow finished faster. I stopped trying to look like an astronaut. I started thinking like one. That's a very different thing. I finally understood why astronauts spend years preparing for missions that might only last a few months. The mission isn't difficult because space is beautiful. It's difficult because space never forgives carelessness. Then, day 30 arrived. Before leaving the station, I floated over to one of the windows for one last look. No camera, no checklist, no distractions, just Earth. From up there, there are no borders, no traffic, no noise, just one small blue planet surrounded by endless darkness. It looked peaceful, fragile, almost impossible to believe that's where every person you've ever known has lived. I came into this challenge thinking astronauts were fearless adventurers. I left realizing they're some of the most disciplined people on Earth. Or above it. Space doesn't reward confidence. It rewards preparation, patience, and the ability to stay calm when every instinct tells you to panic. 30 days wasn't enough to become a real astronaut, but it was enough to understand something I'll never forget. The most incredible part of space isn't how far away it is. It's how much work it takes just to survive there. And after 30 days, I don't just admire astronauts anymore. I respect them.